Hello. It has been a long time. Honestly, I haven't been playing Gary's mod for like over a year now, but I have been playing the crap out of automation and mainly making cars I can drive in BeamNG, so I thought, why not record me doing that? Automation is essentially a car design simulator game, I guess you could say. It's actually called Automation, the car company tycoon game, but I've honestly never gotten into the whole car design tycoon game aspect where you try to design cars for the market stuff. I don't do any of that. I just design cars and then you can import them into BeamNG and drive them, which I think is great. It's a lot of fun. You learn a lot about cars and how they're designed. It's not like a super in-depth design. Like there's more to the engineering a car than this program shows, but I think it's the only thing I've played that goes this in depth. You basically design the motor from like the capacities and some of the more simple stuff about the motor, and then you design like the chassis from like the components used and like the type of suspension and so on and so forth. Anyway, let's go ahead and go through how I usually make my cars. Uh, I don't know if I make them properly or that good or anything. I just have a lot of fun doing it, and I've made a lot of cars. So we're just gonna go into the sandbox mode. There aren't that many cars here that I've made because I honestly just make so many that I just go through and delete them all once in a while, because I just think it's fun making new cars. Let's go ahead and make a new car. Uh, okay, so when you click make a new car, you get to this screen where you've got all these different platforms to choose from. And you can morph the bodies a little bit, add like headlights, door handles, things like that. So let's go ahead and let's pick something from like the 80s or 90s to work on here. I think just like a sedan should be fine. Let's go ahead and do this. The 1990 platform here. Looks like we can make a sedan, a wagon, or a coupe on this platform. Let's go ahead and let's change the model year to 1990, which is the same as that chassis. And then you get to this screen where you start actually making the car. So first you got panel material. This is like what the outside thin metal paneling is that goes over the outside of the chassis. So like the metal that's on the outside of your door and stuff. Usually got a good bet just using partial aluminum. It seems like that's what most cars today or for a long time have used. That's where like your hood and stuff are made out of aluminum, but the other paneling on the cars might be made out of steel. You've got chassis type. Most of these things seem to really mainly just affect weight as far as like the simulation in BeamNG goes. Most cars are monocoque, which is where the chassis is just one big piece. Ladder is like a lot of cars use ladder, like trucks do. Some sedans, like Crown Victorias and stuff, that means that you've got like a frame with the suspension on it, and the actual like cab of the car is bolted onto that frame. And then you've got space frame, so like a race car, and you've got the light truck monocoque is where like the front part is like just one piece, but then the back is part of a frame that the bed bolts onto. We're gonna go with the normal monocoque. And the chassis material is what this actual thing is made out of without the paneling. And you're usually fine just using steel. Later years, you've got like AHS steel, which is like where they use like CAD or something. They like cut pieces of the steel out that aren't necessary for the rigidity of the frame. But 1990 doesn't have that option here, so we're just gonna use galvanized steel. I'm pretty sure my car's chassis is made out of galvanized steel. That's where like the steel's dipped in zinc or whatever, and it gets this kind of rough coating on it, but that helps protect it from the environment. Most of the stuff doesn't matter at all in BeamNG, but whatever. Might as well do it proper, right? Our engine placement, we've got transverse or longitudinal. Basically, I said longitudinal. Longitudinal. That's where Lots of modern cars, like front wheel drives, have the engine mounted like sideways. So like the drive comes out like in Gary's mod, if you mount your engine sideways, and then you've got the like a front wheel drive where the wheels are right under it, or you've got longitudinal where it goes straight back, and then you got like a drive shaft usually running to the back wheels. That's essentially what that means. I think we'd probably be fine with transverse, then we could do front wheel drive, which for a small sedan like this is probably okay. But for more of a sports car kind of thing, you do usually do longitudinal because it's easier to make rear wheel drive that way. But let's go ahead and do let's do transverse. We can always come back and change it. Then you've got your suspension options. A lot of cars use McPherson's, I think, on the front because that's it gives you a lot more room for your engine essentially. As far as I don't know that much about cars, but I like to describe things. But it's you can kind of see the design here too, which is cool. Like double wishbone here, you've got these two wishbones here, so you can't have engine there. So this essentially lets you have a bigger engine space, and you can tell in these sliders. If you look here, it's got like lower sportiness and comfort, but you've got larger cargo volume, got lower weight, things like that. So McPherson's are usually fine. We can do things like solid coil, things like that, like for an off-road vehicle. We're gonna stick with McPherson's though. Then rear suspension, you got a lot more options because the engine doesn't get in the way. Semi-trailing arm is usually like your basic suspension. Lots of cars use this. It's cheap. Just hooks on right there. Torsion beam, which is it only works with your front wheel drive cars. This would make sense because it's a real cheap way to make a front wheel drive car, but it's got this torsion beam going across, so you can't really power these wheels then. At least the way this simulation works. I don't know if all these necessarily equate to real life. Double wishbone gives you some good rear suspension support. Multi-link, this is like sports car stuff. Push rod, super sports car stuff where you got the springs up and they're actually like sideways and they get pushed by this. We're gonna stick to something simple though. This is gonna be more of a economy sort of car. So let's do semi-trailing arm. That way, if we wanted to do like all-wheel drive or something, we'd still be able to do that with semi-trailing arm or wishbones. But let's stick to cheapo trailing arms. Okay, now we design the engine for the car. You got choice from inline engines with up to 6 pistons. You got V engines, both 60 degrees. That's the actual angle at this cylinder bank, or 90 degrees. A lot of American muscle cars use 90 degree V8. Some of them 90 degree V6 because it's easier to manufacture them at 90 degrees. And V6s usually though are, I think, like more efficient at 60 degrees. But I don't know that much about the whole cylinder bank angles. You've also got boxers like this, where the pistons actually like oppose each other and they're sideways. I think Subaru has some cars like this. I know the FRS uses a boxer engine, which is not Subaru, but it uses a Subaru engine. But we're gonna go ahead and stick with a nice inline 4 engine, just something basic. We'll go ahead and use an aluminum block. I could see 2-liter. Basically, you've got your bore, you've got your stroke. Your bore is how wide the actual piston is, and your stroke is how much it goes up and down, essentially, as I understand. So, usually, if you got like a really big bore versus stroke, you can get a little bit of extra torque and things like that, but your engine can't reciprocate as fast because the pistons have got to go way farther, things like that. So we're going to go ahead and tune this down a little bit. I think just leaving this at 86 millimeters is fine. I don't think we need a 2-liter engine. There's a lot of like European kind of sports cars that use 2-liter 4-cylinder engines, I think, but we're not going to worry about that. Let's bring it down to around like 1.8 liters. That should be fine. You've got options. You've got push rods, which a lot of American like muscle cars even today use push rods, but they can't reciprocate as fast because essentially instead of having uh, double cams over the top like this, you can actually make a lot of this stuff disappear, which is cool. See how the engine operates. This actually, there's like all these belts that go up here to the cams, which open up the valves and dump the fuel in. A pushrod engine, instead of having belts that do that, it actually has, let's see if we can make the block disappear here. It actually has rods that attach like directly to like a chain in here, or to like one of the shafts. So this could actually lead to really high efficiency, but these can't reciprocate as fast as a belt and just those cams can. So essentially what you can do is, a pushrod engine is very efficient usually. Also, pushrod engine is usually a lot smaller, if that makes sense, than a, here, let me show you here. Remember how to just make all this stuff right up here. But see, this is a pushrod engine. Here's dual, see it's a lot larger. So you can actually fit a larger capacity engine in the same amount of weight and space as a dual overhead cam engine, but it can't rev as high. So there's different operating conditions essentially. But yeah, most engines I think are usually overhead cam or dual overhead cam nowadays, I'd say. I don't know if that's actually true, but my car's dual overhead cam in real life. But whatever, it doesn't matter. We'll do a single overhead cam. Then you've got different valve settings. This is like how many valves you have to put fuel in the engine. See, you can take a look at it and actually see it here. You've got just one place. There's 2 places in each piston. This has 3 places in each piston, 4 places. This essentially can govern how fast you can put fuel into the motor and how efficient it can run, things like that. So we'll just do 4. And the head materials, just how heavy this top part of the motor is. You can do variable valves, but I think I don't know if maybe this engine can't do it, or if we might just be too early to do this, and that lets you have, on this next page, or the page after this, it lets you have different cam profiles depending on what RPM you're running at. And the cam profile essentially governs how far you open up the valve to dump fuel in, so you can like dump different amounts of fuel in based on how you're running the engine. And then you got all this stuff has to do with weight. This is your actual like crank, like the shaft that goes through here is the crank. And you'd change that to either save weight or have extra strength. Like if you use cast iron, but you're trying to run the motor at like crazy high torque and RPM, this will break and lower your efficiency. We'll just go ahead and use forged steel on that. And con rods will use let's use lightweight forged, and we'll use let's use forged pistons. Either one of these is probably fine. Maybe I know they use these kind of pistons because it's cheaper to make than forging pistons. If we have a forge, we might as well just do forged pistons. Right now we've got a 1.8 liter motor. You can actually change the capacity in the specific variant that's in the car, so you can like change this around without having to rebuild the whole motor. Whatever. Now this is the page we've got our cam profile, and it also describes what all these things are, which is cool. So if you have no idea what any of this stuff is, you can open this up, and the game's still under development. It's early access, so some of this stuff isn't finished. But yeah, this essentially just governs. If we take off the Ooh, this is a cool view. This just governs. These little things are the cams, and that's how far these valves can open when this is spinning around. Like a really high cam profile is going to give us like better high RPM performance, things like that, but you're going to get bad fuel efficiency. So usually you want this lower for just a normal consumer car. VVT is like a variable valve technology. No idea how this works, but it basically gives you like smoother operation because it lets the valves open like different amounts instead of just always being the same. I usually put that in just because it makes the engine run a little bit better. Then you can put a turbocharger on. We're not going to worry about that. And you choose between fuel injectors like modern cars or a carburetor. Stuff all back here. Way to reset this, but I do not remember how to do it. What's this? Oh, just made the block disappear. Something like that. There we go. Reset camera. That's what we wanted to do. I thought that's what we wanted to do. Maybe not. Lordy. All external items. There we go. That's what we wanted. Okay. So 1990, you might have a carburetor. You might have a injectors, but we're just going to go ahead and we're going to go with injection because it's easier. There's different kinds. There's like mechanical, old school fuel injection, which is really expensive, and you got single point, which is kind of like just retrofitting fuel injection instead of a carburetor. I think that's basically what it is. Multi-point. Basically, you can either have a carburetor, which is just like blowing fuel in, like through the intake, or you can have injection, where it's like controlling how much fuel it puts in at once. And all modern cars are going to have fuel injectors. There's no reason not to. You've got different configurations where you've got different throttles, either per cylinder or just a single one. For what we're doing, we should be fine with a single intake, or a single throttle here. We can just have a standard intake. We can use regular fuel. We're not going to worry about those values right now. Then you've got different types of exhaust. I think most cars probably use cast. This is like cheap crap car cast. You've got like nice tubular headers here where you've got like crazy like pre-bent steel things going all the way through and crazy like race stuff. We're just going to use short cast. We're going to put a catalytic converter. I usually just use the high flow 3-way because it doesn't restrict your horsepower as much, but either way. Then you've got mufflers. Okay, once you get all through all that though, basically I just go all the way through all these options till I get the graph here. Then you can actually start tuning your engine. So I'm going to do a reverse flow and baffled. Our engine's knocking a little bit, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to scroll back through all these. And essentially what knocking means is we're using 86 octane fuel, or AKI. I don't remember if this, whatever. Basically what we want to look at is our engine's trying to use 87 octane, but we're using 86. So if we use premium gas, it would stop knocking. This is essentially higher octane gas. Basically means it's harder to burn, or burns more efficiently. So like higher octane gas is actually like less flammable. Like I think diesel probably would have a really high octane if it measured that way. But it's also more expensive. So usually you want to run on 86, but since this is burning easier and more out of control, it's causing the engine to like the pistons to blow up too high, and then the engine's like knocking around and lowering efficiency. And how we can fix that is you can increase your fuel mixture, which will actually bring this number down. So what we want to do is bring this number down to 86. We're not going to do it that way though, because that's not a very good way to do it. You can also bring down your ignition timing. That'll also bring this number down. Or the easiest way is just go back to this screen here where the compression is, and you can either raise your cam profile up, it's going to dump more fuel in, and that lowers this number, or you can lower your compression, which is usually the easiest way to do it. So we just lowered our compression down to 9.4 to 1, and that has lowered our octane to 85.8, which is under 86. And then now we can also see our running performance here. So with variable valves, we get a little bit more torque at the beginning. It kind of flattens out the curve. We don't really need this though, but it does give us better fuel efficiency at 18.3 instead of 7.8. That's might be miles per gallon, but I'm not sure. Okay, let's go back through here and look at some of this other stuff. if we were to change our throttles here, sometimes it can change the actual graph of the engine, but mainly just increases your throttle response. But for a normal motor like this, it doesn't matter that much. We can increase our ignition timing to try to get this closer to 86. Ignition timing is at 53. We have exactly 86 octane. We got 18.6 fuel efficiency. I don't know if this is miles per gallon yet, or if it just is some arbitrary number. Not exactly sure, but I usually try to have this like as close to 20 as I can. Now we can increase our RPM limits. If you increase it too much, I mean the engine's not going to be able to operate at like a super high RPM, so we actually lose power. So we usually want it somewhere around our max horsepower here. It depends on the motor how high this should actually be, but I'm going to have it at like 6,500 RPM. That gives us about 110 horsepower right now, which is sufficient for a little car. And this is the 90s. We could actually, if you raise the cam profile really high, it'll actually raise your horsepower quite a bit, but if you notice, we lost a lot of fuel efficiency doing that. So like a sports car is going to have like a higher cam profile, but we don't really need something super high like that for this application. Let's go ahead and bring it down to about here. We lost a little bit of fuel efficiency, but we got 115 horsepower, which is pretty good. You also usually want to adjust your RPM limit after doing that, because I mean, you could have it limit right at 6,500, but you know, it's going to make the shifts weird and things like that, so I'm going to make it about 6,800. Then your, like I said, your catalytic converters can affect your output, obviously. Well, no catalytic converter, we get more horsepower. Your different kind of mufflers. Baffled's like a cheapo muffler with just like a bunch of things in the way of the gas flow, and then you got like reverse flow where it like goes through a pipe that goes like through an S bend, just to try to make it quieter. Straight through, where it's just kind of, I don't know exactly how all these things look, but it describes what they all are right here, which is cool. We're just going to use a reverse flow into a baffle, which gives us that 115 horsepower with a decent torque curve. You can also raise your quality and stuff, which is engineering time, which will get you a little bit more horsepower. If we go over here to the flow bench tab, you can actually increase the diameter of our exhaust, and we can get a little bit more horsepower. It's going to change like our fuel efficiency and stuff like that, and our noise definitely, but to help, that'll give us a nice even 120 if we just raise it one little notch. And this is our motor that we're using here. Now we can name this motor. So I always just name it like something weird, like let's call it like ABC. Like it's a inline four, so I'll call it like the I4 19 for one for like 1900 cc, and then it's a naturally aspirated, so I usually put A, and then I'll put like a I to say like dash I, something like that, to say that it's a injected engine. So now we go to the next screen. Now we actually pick the specific model that we're looking at, the type of body. We can either go sedan, like a four-door. We can do a station wagon. Not going to do a station wagon with that little motor. I actually kind of was looking at the coupe. Nice little small. I mean, it's got two doors. You know, we can kind of do a little sporty thing. It is front wheel drive. You can adjust some of this stuff, you know, like make the bumper flatter. You can adjust. It's not super in depth right now, but it is decent. Let's adjust this back a little bit. Adjust this. Just like that. That looks pretty good. Let's call this like the like ABC. Ultimate. No, the ABC Impressive S. There we go. ABC Impressive S. You can change your color here. You can change. There's different like trim slots and where you can change your color. Let's make it a nice, nice white. 90s cars are always white. You can change the amount of flake you have. Make it more like silver colored. I'm not gonna do that though. No amount of shine. Let's leave it at that. Check the box. Go next. Now we get to put our actual like light fixtures and stuff in. Okay. What do we want to do here? Do something like this. This white's a little blaring here. Let's put the grill on first. I don't think most of these things, as far as I know, don't really affect the way the car operates. They're just kind of for show. Some things do like wings and stuff like that, but this car's not gonna have a wing, so let's see what this looks like. Okay, let's get some headlights on this thing. If you hold shift and drag, you can actually just copy what you just did. That looks pretty cool. Might change this though, it looks kind of dumb. It's pretty much the longest part of the whole design process, is just figuring out what you want this thing to look like. Looks a little better. Then you can like do stuff where you take like you know, like add like lettering and stuff like that, and like put the name of the car and things like that. I'm not gonna do any of that though. There we go. It looks pretty good. Well, let's go ahead and add like a 90s cars didn't seem to have quite as much of this kind of stuff as modern cars, but whatever. Let's go ahead and this here. Let's add like a running light thing like down here. Should I put it like this maybe? That could also act as like brake ventilation or whatever. That looks pretty good. Alrighty. Now let's put some rear view mirrors on this thing. Those big old rear view mirrors. Yeah. Sexy. Okay. Some door handles. It's a 90s car, so let's go with like these ones with the keyholes. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Let's change this to the color of the car. Yeah. Nice car. Oh yeah. Don't make them like this anymore. Now we're gonna do our tail lights. We got this nice edge here. It's kind of hard to do some of this sometimes with just the way that my mind works. I don't like to like have it crossing over, but sometimes it looks better when you do it like that. So we're just gonna do something like this. And like a lot of cars have like the middle bar thing. Like there's like a light like here too. But we're not gonna worry about that right now. We can like this. We just kind of make it way smaller. Just kind of stick it like here. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. course, we need a license plate. Okay, and then we've got a single exhaust here, so let's go ahead and add that in. It's like down here. Yeah. Of course, we need our place where we fill her up, right? Let's just use a circular one. Put that like here. Okay, and this is the 90s, so obviously we need a radio antenna. A lot of cars don't have these anymore either. Just kind of we can match those up to the horizon here. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there. Alrighty. I usually put like just like some little just some little vents in right here just to kind of it doesn't look exactly like a car, really does, but you know it's pretty close. You know we don't have any badging on it or anything, but that's okay. Yeah, we could add like a moon roof. Some people call these sunroofs. I think it's a moon roof when you can actually open it up. I don't know. Maybe this is a sunroof. I don't care. I'm gonna call it a moon roof. I live in Arizona. We try to avoid talking about the sun. Okay. Stylish, higher trim. Yes, let's actually. I think this would be more back here, wouldn't it? Yeah. This must feel like the most boring video ever, but I do remember some of my older content, so maybe not. Yes! Now this is a car, the ABC Impressive S for sport. If I want to be really boring, I could spell impressive out with these badging icons like on the side, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to worry about that right now. There aren't really any indicators here, but I mean, you could have the indicator under this. You could change the color of this, but whatever. We're just gonna pretend that there's some other technology going on there. Okay, modern cars sometimes don't have that. Okay, so now we can make either transverse all-wheel drive, which would be a little overkill, I think, for 120 horsepower. That's gonna power all the wheels. And you can change like the power distribution, like an actual all-wheel drive car. 4x4, I think, usually just puts equal power to the rear and front wheels, but this you can actually change your power distribution. We're just gonna leave it at front wheel drive. We're gonna use advanced automatic, like a real American car. 4 ratios, 2 ratio, 4 ratios. It gives you an estimated top speed. I usually just try to match that as much as I can. 135. You can put an actual hard limiter in if you want, but the way that the actual vehicle transmits over to BeamNG, it's probably not gonna reach anywhere near 130, even though it says that's the top speed. Just the way the drag and stuff, it doesn't seem to transfer exactly how you'd expect it to. Uh, but either way, it should be fine. We're just gonna use an open diff. You could use you got all these different options. These are manual and automatic, or more for off-road vehicles. You got geared, which that's usually what I use. Viscous is kind of like a torque converter, I guess, where you got, but not exactly. Where like you've got like a little wheels, and it's like a fluid coupler kind of thing, and it does tell you all this stuff here. And then when the fluid heats up too much, it locks up, and it's like a simple limited slip differential, which is basically what these are. That's where essentially, like, if you locked one of these wheels in place, the differential would then provide power to this wheel instead. And limited slip means that if this wheel was actually locked in place, it would be putting power into this wheel to a certain extent before using. So it can essentially grant you better control and stuff. But we're not going to worry about that because this car's not going to be that fast. Tire type, spelt in the old way or the new way or whatever. Crossply, you pretty much never use this unless you're making a car from like the 1940s. Cars have not used tires like that since like the 60s in real life. Medium compound's fine. That's usually what you use on most of your cars unless it's off-road or a big truck or something. Uh, it tells you all the pros and cons here, like comfort and things like that. hard, long life lasts longer. Sports is like if we're making a really fast car. This is the actual tire width. We actually have got a lot of play here with the width of the tires. We're not going to worry about that right now, though. And then you can make change your rim material. We actually could change the way the rims worked back in the fixture place, but we didn't, so we're just not going to worry about it. Alloy rims. A lot of newer cars use these. I think for the 90s, though, we'd probably stick to steel. Then we got brakes. We've got the normal disc brakes. That's what most cars have now. That's where you've got like a flat disc and the pads push into the sides of it. You'd probably just use a normal solid disc because this thing's not that fast. It doesn't need racing things. Then you got your number of pistons. My car, I drive a Scion but uses one piston. This is just how hard it can press that thing against your brake pad. We're going to leave it at 1 for now because this looks like a not too heavy of a car. It's the 90s, so it's probably going to have like drums in the back. Drums are where you've got like you've basically got like a thing inside the wheels. It's kind of like a donut shape, and then it's got shoes that actually push up against the. It's every time I think about it, I'm like, why didn't they just think of disc brakes right away? But I mean, you can't really look at the past through the eyes of today. But yeah, it's kind of like a donut shape, and then like when you hit the brakes, it like pushes things out. Like it's essentially like 90 degrees. They don't work as well as disc brakes, but they're usually used in the back of vehicles. My car is a 2006. It's got drums in the back, discs in the front. Doesn't matter that much unless you're in a sports car. We're going to use semi-clad under tray. That's just, you can't see it in this because they don't have it like modeled, I'm pretty sure, but that's just like where you got like plastic things under your motor and stuff. Help with aerodynamics and things like that. I usually turn the brake airflow up a little bit because if your brakes get too hot, they just don't work. That's called brake fade. If you were like driving down a mountain and you didn't downshift and you were just using your brakes the whole time, your brakes actually work by transmitting your forward speed into heat. So if they get like really hot, they just don't work. So you usually want some kind of airflow on your brakes. The normal cooling is usually fine, just left as it is. Seats. We've got 3 in the back. You can change these to like +2 seats, like smaller seats. We're just going to leave it at 3. That's because it is based on a sedan model. We're going to use these are just comfort things. We're going to use a standard interior, and we're going to use a standard cassette entertainment. Variable hydraulic. That's usually what you want over normal hydraulic. We've got traction control settings and ABC. Or ABS, sorry. ABS is basically when you slam on the brakes. Almost all new cars are going to have this. If you slam on the brakes, instead of your wheels just locking up and you sliding, it keeps your wheels from locking up. And it's especially important if you're not a very good driver, or if you're not a professional driver and you want to slam on the brakes and turn at the same time. This allows you to maintain control of your vehicle. Because if your front wheels locked up and then you tried to turn, you won't be able to turn because your front wheels have no traction because they're locked up and sliding. So this is a big deal. Almost like traction control, yeah, that's usually more important if you're like in a really fast car because it keeps you from like just spinning out all the time and stuff like that. But that's not that important on a slower car. It helps a lot with like ice and things like that. But we're not going to worry about that 90s car. But we are definitely going to use the ABS, which is like anti-lock brakes. I think that stands for. You got safety. All this stuff mainly just is just weight. We're going to use advanced 90s. Then we got spring types. You got hydropneumatic, which uses like a fluid cylinder. Standard, which is just a normal spring, and then progressive, which is like a wider spring. This usually is better for like comfort and just general things. Maybe it's not as sporty, but you're gonna be more comfortable with progressive springs. So you got your like dampers, which keep the springs from like going all over the place. I think these are kind of like shocks. Not 100% sure on that. But yeah, if you didn't have these, then because if you ever take like a spring and throw it on the ground, it bounces all over the place. This helps damper that. And Gary's mod, all this stuff it's basically the same. It's Gary's mod, it's just a different part. We're gonna use gas mono tube because that's a little more comfortable than twin tube. And that puts us into this screening where we can adjust things. So usually I start out on the suspension screen. Right now our suspension's really hard, like we're using a race car. We don't really need that. So I usually just hit uh, the preset, and that automatically adjusts our camber and stuff. Camber is actually the angle at which the wheels sit. Because in your car, your wheels are not actually generally, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is probably 100% true. They aren't just straight up and down, like parallel with the road. They actually move in like this, if you can see my mouse, a little bit, just like 1 or 2 degrees. And that's a big deal because that essentially, it's if you ever watch my dihedral video, it helps you with your like stability on your car. So like for instance, if you turn your wheels off to the left or to the right, they're going to automatically want to return back to the middle because there's an angle here. And that just helps it so you're not constantly readjusting and things like that. I don't think you would want like a positive camber where your wheels are going out this way. I might have that backwards, but I'm pretty sure I don't, because that would just make you have lower stability. So it's really similar to like dihedral, ahedral on an aircraft, but a little bit different, I guess. Another cool thing, which this is not totally related to this, is when you turn your car, so your wheels are going like pointing to the left or to the right, and this is something I never realized making cars in Gary's mod. Uh, so imagine that you're making two circles with your car, right? You got one on the inside and a little bit bigger one on the outside. Since the wheels on the outside have a bigger circle, the outside wheel on your car actually doesn't turn as much as the inside wheel. So unlike in Gary's mod where we always make cars where the wheels are locked together and turn at exactly the same amount to either left or right, one of your wheels is actually turning a couple degrees less. No joke. This is how a real car works. So it follows that longer circle along the outside, which that never occurred to me in my life. And I've never made a Gary's mod car that way. I don't know if anybody has. I don't know if they make them that way now because I haven't played in like 2 years. I don't even know if people make cars anymore. It's probably not as important in Gary's mod since you make spherical and you've only got like 1 pixel touching the road. But either way, that's just interesting because if your car wheels didn't do that, you'd like slide a lot more and things like that. Wear out your tires. So yeah, literally one of your tires is not turning as much as the other one, and there's like a mechanical engineering component which does that in the way the steering is designed. And and the whole thing with the camber where your wheels are turned a little bit, you can tell a lot if you ever stop your car in a parking spot that the wheels are not perfectly parallel with the road. If you stop and have your wheel like turned all the way to the right or to the left, because that actually, if you ever turn all the way to the right and then you just press the gas, you'll notice the steering wheel automatically returns to the center. It's because you've got that camber that happens. It's actually just your wheels interfacing with the road that does that. It's not no computers or anything. It's actually really fancy. I think there's like a Learn Engineering video or something that goes over this, and it's actually crazy complex. And I wish I still played Gary's mod because I'd like to test some of that stuff. So anyway, now we've got all these problems with our car here. I usually like to fix this stuff, even though it probably doesn't matter that much for BeamNG. So it's telling us that we've got our spring stiffness isn't high enough. I usually just raise spring stiffness here. They've got this handy graph here. This used to not be here, so this is really confusing. But I'll just raise this up a little bit so we've still got decent comfort. We also want to raise the dampener up here. And it gives us this ride frequency chart here. So if we raise all these things up, but don't go past this line, that'll keep decent comfort while still maintaining drivability essentially. So use something like that. That just got rid of all those errors with our suspension. I usually don't touch the sway bars unless it says there's a problem. I never touch the camber. You can make the camber like 45 degrees. I haven't done that. I'll have to try that at some point. So it's telling us that we should increase the spring stiffness or the ride height still, which is weird. Maybe if we increase dampers, can it help with that? Nope. Maybe this car weighs more than I thought it did. So we can increase our spring stiffness more. Yeah, that got rid of that error there, so let's do that, I guess. It's going to lower our comfort doing that, but this isn't that fancy of a car, so we're just going to leave it about right there. Now it's telling us we've got understeer, which is pretty normal for front-wheel drive. But we can increase that or decrease that understeer if we add some front grip. The easiest way to do that is just to increase your tire width on the front, and that just got rid of it right away. So I'd like to keep the tires the same, because then you can rotate the tires back and forth. Doesn't really matter for BeamNG, which is the whole point we're doing this, but whatever. Okay, now if we go back to our gearing, our top speed's changed a little bit, but we can leave that as it is. We've got a little bit of wheel spin, doesn't matter. Front wheel drive's not going to be a problem. Now it's telling us we've got low brake force, so if we go back to this brake area, we can just change the size of the brakes. The automation always says you have brake fade, pretty much, unless you've got like 350mm brakes and everything, so this car's not going to be going that fast, so it doesn't really matter. We don't need huge brakes on it. And the brake is literally just the size of this disc, so if you've got a bigger brake, you're going to have more friction. The backs are drums, which always have lower force than discs do. We're not going to worry about that too much. So we're going to go ahead and just use 220mm front brakes, and the rear brakes are going to have to be a little bit bigger because they're drums. So I usually just adjust it until that yellow goes away. You don't have to. We're just making this for BeamNG. It doesn't really matter that much. These are pretty big brakes, but whatever. So now we've got all the yellow gone away. It tells us we have brake fade. There's really nothing we can do about that other than making gigantic brakes, which a car like this isn't going to have brakes that big. It's not a race car. So anyway, this is our car. This is the ABC Impressive S. You've got all these cool little things you can look at, like it's a nice fun car or whatever. These stuff, I like to just look at this stuff. You know, like look at the information. You can look at the detailed stats, see like where you've gone wrong, what's wrong with it, all this stuff. Look at the test track where it like shows you how fast it goes. It says you can drive this track in BeamNG, and there's no way this car is going to go 127. Well, we might get up over 100, but it's not going to go that fast. So the way it actually models into BeamNG is not exactly the same. But let's go ahead and export this thing to BeamNG so we can drive it in there in a second. So we just go to this screen. I'm going to save it in this program first, and then I'm going to click Export Car. And then we click Export. We wait a little bit. And it's done. Now, when we open up BeamNG, it's going to just be in there. There's a lot more settings and stuff you can change with these cars, but I didn't touch them because some of them are complicated, some of them I don't really want to mess with. But just for right now, this is good. I'm going to make another video with the BeamNG part in it, so we don't have to sit through here. I think we're going on 50 minutes right now for this video. So I'll make another video with driving around BeamNG. Anyway, I really like this game. This game is just a lot of fun. It's fun to make sports cars especially, but some of these more conservative sort of cars are also pretty fun. So anyway, it's been a while since I made a video. Expect another one from BeamNG very soon, maybe even today. See ya.